Welcome to DevOps Clinic, where our goal is to help you become a better DevOps engineer or Linux system admin. My name is Matt, and I've been a Linux system admin, network engineer, and DevOps engineer for over 25 years. I'm also a SaltStack certified engineer. So if at any time you have any questions or comments about this video, please leave them in the comments below. Our goal is to help you learn new skills as a DevOps engineer or Linux system admin. So if there's a problem that you're stuck on, we're here to help. This series is about one of my favorite topics, the Salt project. What is Salt? It's an open source software for event-driven IT automation, remote task execution, and configuration management. That's a mouthful, but basically what Salt does is to help you automate your infrastructure. You may hear me or others refer to this as either Salt Project, Salt, Salt Open, or Salt Stack. People use them interchangeably, but two things to keep in mind. Salt Project is the name of the open source project. It's free for everyone. And Salt Stack is the name of the company recently purchased by VMware, and they create commercial software that sits on top of the open source Salt project. In this series, we will not be covering the commercial product, but we may refer you to their website where the open source software and documentation are hosted. Today we're going to cover getting Salt installed and some basic usage. There are a number of ways to use Salt, but for this series we're going to focus on the master and minion topology. We may focus on some more of the advanced techniques in future videos, but for right now, the master server acts as a central control bus for the clients, which are called minions. Minions connect back to the master to find out what they're supposed to do. Alright, let's get started. It's highly recommended that you have a dedicated server or a virtual machine for your Salt master. But one of the great things about Salt is it's really lightweight and it'll run on everything, including a Raspberry Pi. For our training, we're using virtual servers provided by our sponsor, Linode. If you have the need for any virtual servers, please help support the channel by clicking on the link in the description below. Before we get started, I'm going to show you the saltproject.io website. This is the site that has everything about Salt here. Everything from news and updates to documentation, and the thing that I'm going to show you right now is the download section. Here you'll be able to see all the different operating systems that Salt supports. It'll show you how to add the repositories for each of these OSs. And for right now, we're just going to show you the Red Hat CentOS. And since we're using CentOS 7, you can see here it shows how to add the repository and the commands to install. Alright, so now we are at our Salt master server, and the first thing that we're going to need to do is to install the yum repository. So we will paste this command in here. Alright, now that that's done, let's clear the screen, and the next thing we need to do is install the Salt software. So we're going to install the salt-master and the salt-minion. We'll run the minion on this server as well. Now that it's installed, we'll move on to the next step. Alright, now that the Salt Master and Salt Minion is installed on the Salt Master server, we need to start configuring this. Now, all configuration is kept in the etc salt folder. In this folder, you're going to find a bunch of files and also more subfolders. To start off, the master configuration can be in two different places. One is the master file. I recommend not altering this file. Every time that you update Salt, this file will get updated with either new or deprecated config options. So I recommend leaving this the way it is and using it to reference for what options are available. One of the options we're going to look at right now is called the interface. And right now, if we were to start Salt, it's going to listen on all interfaces. Now, if your server has both a public internet-facing IP and an internal one, this could be a security risk, and you probably don't want it exposed to the internet. So if you keep your server internal with no public access, this doesn't matter. But in this case, we're using a virtual server, and I do have public access, so I want to make sure that I lock it down properly. Alright, if we were to pull up ifconfig, we can see that it has both a public IP address and a private IP address. And this is the one that we want to use with our configuration. Now, as I mentioned, I prefer not to put my configurations in the etc salt/master file. Instead, there is the master.d folder. And currently it's empty, but what you can do is just create any file in this folder with any name as long as it ends in .conf. And when you start the Salt Master service, it will read this file and read in all the configuration. So we're going to set the interface to listen only on 10.10.10.10. The only remaining thing to do is we need to enable the service so that if our system reboots, it will start automatically. And we need to start the Salt Master service. All right. Now that we have the Salt Master service running, we could check that with systemctl status salt-master. All right, so now we need to set up the Salt Minion service on the Salt Master. Just like the master configuration file, there is a minion configuration file. And again, I prefer to use this as a reference. I do not want to make changes to it because when Salt updates, it'll pull down the latest or remove the deprecated options. Instead, I will put my configurations in minion.d. And I can name that file anything I want. As long as it ends in .conf. And the one setting we want to add here is how to connect to the Salt Master server. Now, it's local and I don't need to put this in here, but I will show you one other trick in the future. For now, we can enable the Salt Minion service, and then we can start the Salt Minion service. And let's check. Great, so the Salt Minion and the Salt Master services are running on the Salt Master. All right, now we have the Salt Master and the Salt Minion service running. But there's one additional step that we need to take to make the two communicate with each other. Salt uses public and private keys to make sure that your minion is who it says it is when it checks in with the master. And by default, it is set so that you need to go in and approve each minion that connects to your Salt Master. So as we can see right here, we have unaccepted keys, and salt.devops.clinic, which is this server that we're working on, has an unaccepted key. So what we can do to accept that is salt-key -lowercase a, and then the name of the server. It's going to ask us, do we proceed or not? So we say yes. And if we were to run -l again, we can now see it's an accepted key. All right, now having a Salt Master with Salt Minion running on the same box, that's great if you only want to configure one box, but the true power of using Salt is that you can control hundreds or thousands of machines. So this wouldn't be a good tutorial if I didn't show you a couple additional minions. So one of the things we have is we have 3 additional minions, and what I've chosen is CentOS 7, Ubuntu, and Debian. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set those up as minions as well. And so this minion is running CentOS 7, and just like the Salt Master, we're going to install the repository. And then we are going to install only the Salt Minion. All right, as I previously mentioned, all of our configuration for Salt is in the Salt folder. And we can go ahead and either edit the minion file or the minion.d file. And we want to basically tell this minion how to connect to the Salt master server. All right, as I previously showed you, in the etc salt folder, we have the minion config file and any files under the minion.d. One of the neat features about Salt is if you set up your domain names properly and you set up a host called Salt, and you'd have to have this set up in DNS, so in this case, salt.devops.clinic, I can now ping that. Because I can ping that without any configuration in the minion config, when we start this service, it's going to automatically connect to the Salt master. Again, you need to have all your DNS set up properly. In this environment, because it's a test environment, what we chose to do is set some records in the etc host file. And you can see right here, because we're not using proper DNS, etc host is saying basically 10.10.10.10 can be resolved to these domain names. So if we look here, in the minion.d folder, there's no configuration, and we have not set in the minion, we have not set a master setting. All right, let's go ahead and enable and start the Salt Minion service. All right, now if you remember, in the previous step when we started the Salt Minion on the Salt master, we had to go and look at the keys. So let's clear the screen and salt-key-L. And now you can see we have the accepted key for the Salt master's minion service, and we have a new unaccepted key called minion1.devopsclinic.com. To let it join, we do salt-key-A and then the name of the server. Now, there are two additional ways. If you have a lot of hosts that you need to accept all at once, I'm going to not run this. You can also run salt-key-A, and what this is going to do is any unaccepted hosts, it will then ask, do you want to adopt all of these, whether it's one or whether it's hundreds? All right. So as previously mentioned, there are numerous ways to accept the keys, and using -A with the minion name or -A to accept all is great. But if you're in an environment where you're launching lots of servers, either the cloud or even, there's a company I work for and we use VMware, we're launching servers all the time. You don't want to have to go into your Salt master and continuously go and say accept these keys. There is a configuration option, and if we look in the master, it's auto_accept, and by default this is set to not automatically accept the keys. They want you to manually do this. The reason they're wanting you to manually do this is they don't want you to have your Salt master exposed to the internet without proper safeguards in place. Since we previously set our Salt master to only listen on a private IP address, we can safely go and add this feature in here. So let's say auto accept is true, and we'll save and quit. Let's clear the screen. Okay, now that we made that change, let's restart the Salt master. Any configuration changes does require you to restart Salt master. And let's move over to our Debian server. So here we have Debian. And let's add the GPG key. And we'll add the apt repository. Now, if we do an apt-get update and an apt-get install salt-minion, all right, now let's go over to our Ubuntu server. Okay, now that that is added, we'll do an apt-get update and an apt-get install for Salt Minion. All right. On Minion 2 and 3, the Debian Ubuntu servers, we haven't configured anything, so they're going to use just DNS. Also, one thing to note with Red Hat CentOS systems, you do need to enable and start services, but with Debian Ubuntu, they are started automatically. Now, if we look at the Salt Master, let's clear the screen, and let's look at the keys. So we had previously had auto accept off, false. Now we have it set to true. And if we list all the keys, we can see we did not have to accept Minion 2 and 3. So if you have a large organization and you're constantly deploying servers, or your Salt Master is not going to be protected, it's out on the internet, you want to turn that feature off. But if you have the proper security in place, turning this on is a great option. All right, one additional note about Salt and its key system. So to make it easy, every host has to have a unique name. I prefer to use DNS names. So if you were to run hostname on these servers, they have proper DNS names set for them. When the Salt Minion service starts up, it creates a minion_ID file, and this is based on the host name. So if we were to look at this file right here, it's going to have the host name in here. And once it creates this file, this is the name that will be referred to in the key system. All right, one additional note about Salt and its key system. So to make it easy, every host has to have a unique name. I prefer to use DNS names. So if you were to run hostname on these servers, they have proper DNS names set for them. When the Salt Minion service starts up, it creates a minion_ID file, and this is based on the host name. So if we were to look at this file right here, it's going to have the host name in here. And once it creates this file, this is the name that will be referred to in the key system. Sometimes you might have issues where you have a conflict of keys, either due to name or something like that. I've had issues in the past when I've had to restore a server, and now you've got the original server and the new server both having the same name, and so there'll be a key conflict. When you have these issues, you can use the salt-key-d with the minion name. When running this will remove the key from the system. It will also prevent that server from communicating, but then you can go onto the minion and clean up those keys and then recreate them. Before we run this command, let's go over to Minion 3 and let's stop the Salt Minion service. Now that that's stopped on the Salt Master, we can remove this key. And again, be very careful if you need to clean up keys. And we can see now that Minion 3 is no longer accepted by the Salt Master. And to clean up the keys, what you'll want to do is go into the etc salt folder, and there is a PKI folder, and then a minion folder. And you'll want to remove the minion_master.pub and then the minion.pem and pub files. And then once this is done, you can start up the Salt Minion service again. And if we were to go back, we can now see it's regenerated its keys and can now connect properly. Now that we have the Salt Master set up and configured, and we have itself being a minion and 3 additional minions configured, what can we do with Salt? Well, one of the very basic things is what's called a test.ping. Let's just see what servers are up and running. So to do this, we want to use the salt command on the Salt Master, and we're going to specify asterisk. This is going to mean any server that has registered with Salt. And if we do test.ping, what this is going to do is it's going to send out a command saying, hey, any server that's registered with me, please respond if you're online. And one thing to keep in mind is when you run commands, they are executed at that time. If a server is offline and comes back online, it will not run this command. You'll have to run it at that time. This command is extremely useful for troubleshooting or even just seeing what servers are online if you need to generate a asset list or something like that. If you're trying to troubleshoot, another command to know is the test.version. And what this will do is this will ask all of the minions, tell me what version of Salt you are using. And as you can see here, we're using 3004 for the version for all of them. If you wanted to find out more detail, if you were opening a trouble ticket with the Salt project on GitHub, a lot of times they're going to ask you for all the different versions of the packages and things that are being used. And what you can do is you can run, let's use minion1 test.versions report. And that's versions with an S, which is different than test.version. And you can see here, it asks minion1, tell me everything about you and the Salt. So it's using Salt 3004, it's using a certain version of Jinja and M2 crypto. And usually when you open a ticket, they'll ask you for this information for your Salt master and or the minions, or maybe both. Great, we have Salt master configured. We got 3 Salt minions configured. Salt is such a powerful piece of software, and I look forward to showing you why I've come to rely on it daily. Part 2 of getting started with Salt will be out soon. Be sure to subscribe. Click the bell icon so you can be notified when it's available. And if this video was helpful, please like and share. Again, if you have any questions or comments or you need any assistance when it comes to Salt, please leave them in the comments below. We would love to help you. And until next time, automate everything.